Hey everyone, this is Cody, and today I'll be reviewing the new Seestar S30 Pro Smart Telescope. I will be comparing this a little bit to the S30 today, the standard telescope of course, but unlike a lot of reviewers, I'm not going to focus on the software side of things so much as I am going to focus on the hardware side of things, and that's really what sets the S30 Pro apart from the standard S30. So hopefully this video doesn't get too technical, but I do want to kind of dive into what makes this smart telescope so much better than the standard version. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. Before I dive into the content, I just wanted to let you know that ZWO did send me this S30 Pro for free for a review. I did not pay for this. So keep that in mind as you listen to the information that I'm giving you today. However, I will say I am not an influencer. My channel predates the whole influencer age. My goal has always just been to bring you honest, reliable reviews that you can trust. And my goal in that has never changed. I'm not out to make a ton of money or anything like that. So if you're here if you're looking at buying the S30 Pro, or if you're, kind of considering it, great. If you're just here for the information, that's fine too. But I just wanted to let you know that before we get started. So now let's go ahead. Now today I'm not going to cover a whole lot about battery life or the dew heater or filters, that sort of thing, because I covered those in my original Seestar S30 review that you can see at the top of the screen if you'd like. But I am going to show you just how darn quiet it is. So let me open the arm here. And I'm right next to it and I can't even hear it. It's amazing. You are definitely not going to bother your neighbors with the Seestar S30 Pro unless you have the voice turned to high. I have the voice turned to mute, but if you don't, it'll say, autofocus completed, kind of loud. So turn that down to low or turn it off completely in the app and no one will hear it at all. In this review, I'll cover all the typical review material, what it comes with, main features, that sort of thing. But there's four main things that I want to focus on for today comparing the S30 to the S30 Pro. The first and most obvious is the imaging sensor and the sensor size. It's a huge difference that you'll notice right off the bat. The second is the S30 Pro has an additional lens. It is a quadruplet, whereas the S30 is just a triplet. The third thing we'll cover is the wide angle sensor in the S30 Pro. And the last thing is we'll talk about the new Milky Way mode. So we'll cover everything today, but let's go ahead and get started with number one and talk about the imaging sensor. Okay, let's talk about the main difference between the Seestar S30 Pro and the Seestar S30, and that is in the main imaging sensor. So the Sony IMX585 is what's utilized in the S30 Pro. It is an awesome imaging sensor. It's been incredibly popular the last year or so, and for good reason. Whereas the Seestar S30 utilizes the Sony IMX662 sensor, which is also a good sensor. The huge difference though is in the size. The IMX585 is way bigger than the 662 sensor. I actually made you a little graphic in Photoshop to show the difference, and you can see just how much larger the IMX585 sensor is compared to the IMX662. So you're going to get a way bigger field of view with the Seestar S30 Pro. And the benefit to that is, well, if you want to image a large nebula with the S30, you're probably going to need a mosaic. And you'll have to have quite a few panels, and each panel requires, a certain amount of time to get good results. Whereas with the Seestar S30 Pro, you're probably just going to be able to fit that entire nebula in one image, which will improve that signal to noise ratio as well. So you're getting a huge benefit by getting a way larger field of view. The other thing that's nice about the 585 sensor is it has the same pixel size as the 662 sensor, 2.9 microns. So the resolution of these two telescope systems is basically the same. That's not exactly true, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But for now, just assume that the resolution of these is identical. So I've actually seen some commenters online say, well, I actually like the field of view of the S30 more than I do of the S30 Pro, so I'm not going to get one. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Because the resolution on these telescopes is the same, you could take an image of the same object with an S30 Pro and get a way bigger field of view. And if you don't like that field of view, you can simply just crop it, and you're not going to have any difference between an S30 image. The resolution is the same. And just overall, I think the 585 sensor is better anyway. So I don't think there's, any disadvantage going to a much larger sensor of the same resolution. Now, I did say the resolutions aren't quite the same. And if you really look at the specifications closely, you'll see that the focal length of the S30 Pro is 160 millimeters, whereas the focal length of the S30 is 150 millimeters. So actually, the resolution of the S30 Pro is a little bit better than the S30. Because the pixel size is the same and this focal length is a little bit longer, your resolution will be slightly better here, and you're going to have a way better field of view. It's just a win-win, frankly. So those differences really do add up. The 585 sensor is awesome. It's been a great choice in a lot of different cameras and smart telescopes. So I'm really glad ZWO decided to put that sensor in here. Above all the changes, just changing that sensor to a 585 would make it worth it to me to get an S30 Pro instead of an S30. But that's not the only thing, so we'll go ahead and talk about number 2 now, and that is the additional lens that the S30 Pro has as well. As mentioned, the S30 is a triplet apochromatic refractor. So it has 3 lenses, and it's pretty well color corrected. The S30 Pro is a quadruplet apochromatic refractor. So it has 4 lenses, and that 4th lens serves as a field flattener. And it's actually the first thing I noticed when I took an image with the S30 Pro. Like, obviously I knew the field of view was going to be a lot larger. I didn't realize how sharp the corner stars were going to be. I took the first image and I looked over at my wife and I said, whoa, these corner stars are way better than the S30. And they're not bad in the S30, but they're really sharp in the S30 Pro because of that 4th lens element in there. So it's a great job from ZWO because they easily could have just put in a 585 sensor here and said, hey, this is the S30 Pro. But with a larger sensor, they were really cognizant that they wanted to make sure those corner stars look good. So they added that additional lens element to give you a better quality image as well. So that was the first thing I noticed, and I think it was a great touch to add that to the S30 Pro too, just to sweeten the pot a little bit. Let's talk about the 3rd substantial upgrade to the S30 Pro, and that is the overhaul of the wide-angle lens system. So on the S30, the wide-angle system gives you a field of view of about 23 degrees. On the S30 Pro, that is 63 degrees, a massive upgrade compared to the S30. Another interesting thing about the S30 is that ZWO doesn't really tell you what sensor they use in the wide-angle system. If you look online, it usually says custom sensor or specific sensor, but it never actually names it. Well, after a lot of internet digging, I found that it is the Galaxy Core GC2083 sensor. That is a 1920 by 1080 sensor, 2.1 megapixels. The size is 1/3 inch format, and the pixel sizes are 2.7 microns. Well, the S30 Pro takes that up a notch. So it goes with the Sony IMX586 sensor, which has tiny 0.8 micron pixels and is the 1/2 inch sensor size. So just a huge upgrade just right there in terms of sensor. The lens on the wide-angle system, the focal length is 6 millimeters. The aperture is 3.4 millimeters, giving it a focal ratio of about f1.76. So it's very fast, just like a typical wide-angle lens should be. Now, what's really cool though, with those small pixels, I should actually say tiny pixel sizes because they are very small, you can get some pretty decent resolution out of this compared to a mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras usually have pixel sizes of about 6, 7 microns. No, I'm just kidding. About 4 microns. So I'm not saying the S30 Pro is going to replace, full frame mirrorless cameras for Milky Way photography and landscape photography, but it will be really cool to see what people do with those small pixel sizes and the new Milky Way mode where you can do some 8K stitching. I did bring the S30 Pro out to my Bortle 1 dark sky site. I'm gonna try Milky Way mode with the winter Milky Way. Unfortunately, I won't be able to image Sagittarius quite yet, but we'll see how I can do. My Milky Way shot turned out okay, I would say. You can see the galaxy there, but I am very excited for summertime and I can shoot the Sagittarius region and Rho Ophiuchus and really see how the S30 Pro does in Milky Way mode. The other substantial upgrade to the wide-angle system is it does autofocusing, whereas the S30 does not. So you can see the wide-angle lens system has been pretty much overhauled from the S30. It is way better in every single way, so huge upgrade for the S30 Pro. If you watched my Seestar S30 review, you'll recall that I was a little bummed you can't use the wide-angle lens system for long exposure star trail imaging. Well, the S30 Pro fixes that. Embedded in the Milky Way mode, there is a star trail mode, and I've been playing around with it and having a lot of fun. Unfortunately though, the Star Trail mode does not allow you to save individual frames. So if you have satellites streaking through or aircraft or anything like that, you can't go in and remove those images from the stack, which is a little bit of a bummer. So hopefully we do get that option in the future. However, in the Milky Way mode, it does save the individual frames and you can remove those later on. So yeah, ZWO is listening. Awesome job in integrating long exposures into the S30 Pro, and I think Star Trail mode is going to be a hit. One disadvantage of the S30 Pro is the storage capacity. The S30 Pro has 128 gigabytes of internal storage, whereas the S30 only has 64 gigabytes of internal storage. So why is that a disadvantage? Well, if you look here, you'll see that the raw image files on the S30 Pro are 4 times larger than the S30. And that makes sense because the two imaging sensors have the same pixel size, but the S30 Pro sensor is twice as large, meaning 4 times the area, 4 times the pixels, and, well, roughly 4 times larger images. But ZWO only doubled the storage capacity on the S30 Pro. They didn't quadruple it. So you'll only be able to store about half of the raw images on the S30 Pro compared to the S30. It's really easy to think of this mathematically. For the S30, if you take the 64,000 megabytes and you divide it by about 4 megabytes per photo, that gives you about 16,000 raw images that can be stored, roughly. If you take the 128,000 megabytes on the S30 Pro, divide it by 16 megabytes per raw photo, that gives you about 8,000 raw photos that you can store here. So only about half the capacity. It definitely would have been better if ZWO gave us 256 gigabytes of internal storage here, but honestly, I don't think most people are storing that many photos on the Seestar anyway, but it's just something I thought I'd mention. The other nice thing too is if you're in the app, you don't have to save individual photos if you don't want to fill the internal storage capacity. If you just want to image and save that final image, that stacked image, that's totally fine. If you're more of an advanced astrophotographer and you like to process your own images, then you can go into the app and turn on the option to save individual FITS files, and you can process them later and stack them. Battery capacity on the S30 Pro is the same as the S30 at 6,000 milliamp hours, which is going to give you about 6 to 7 hours of continuous runtime. However, if it's cold outside and you're running the dew heater, that's going to substantially drop, so at that point I would just recommend plugging in with a USB-C power source, and then you don't have to worry about it. One thing I would highly recommend if you own any of the Seestar smart telescopes is to use them in equatorial mode. In the standard altitude azimuth mode, you can only image up to 30 seconds, and even then you're probably going to start to see the impacts of field rotation in your images. With equatorial mode, you can image up to 60 seconds, and with a good polar alignment, your stars will be nice and round and you'll have no field rotation. So I would definitely recommend getting a good tripod head that will allow you to use equatorial mode. I recently just finished a review of the Seestar TH10 equatorial tripod head, so be sure to see that if you're interested. I also show you how to polar align the Seestar in that video, but honestly, it's super simple. It's just a couple steps. So it's well worth it to use the Seestar in equatorial mode. I think the images are much better, and it's easy to do. While you're in equatorial mode, the power button will appear green, and in altitude azimuth mode, the power button will appear orange. Moving on with the Seestar S30 Pro hardware, let's talk about the filters a little bit. So Built in, you have a dark filter. That's going to essentially take a dark image, and that noise, the dark current, can be removed from the images you take, and that's all automatic, which is really nice. It also has built in just a standard UV IR cut filter. So what that does is that gets rid of the infrared signal and the ultraviolet signal so that you don't get any weird colors or star bloating in your images. It also has a light pollution filter. So if you're in a really light polluted area, you can tap that filter button and try and cut out a lot of that light pollution filter. Now this filter has a 30 nanometer bandpass for oxygen 3 and a 20 nanometer bandpass for hydrogen alpha. So it is a little bit wider than a typical narrowband filter. I wouldn't say it's to the level of being considered a broadband filter. You'd still say it's narrowband, but it's not super narrow. So it will still let in a little bit of that light pollution, but it's going to be way better than if you don't have anything at all. So you might notice a little bit of gradient still if you're in a really light polluted area, but the app has a dynamic background extraction tool that you can tap with one finger and hopefully just get rid of anything that gets in the way there, which is pretty cool. It also has a magnetic solar filter that you can clip over the front so you can observe the sun. And one thing that's cool about this is it actually blocks the wide angle lens as well. So you can just drop that over, wide angle lens is blocked off, and then you have your main sensor protected and can image the sun with that. If you're lazy like me and you don't like to switch between modes, well, the Seestar also observes the sun easily in equatorial mode. The Seestar S30 Pro does come with a nice carry case that holds the tripod, USB cable, your magnetic solar filter, and it does have a shoulder strap with it as well. If I open this up here, you can see in the inner panel, you do have the magnetic solar filter here in its own little pocket, room for other accessories. I like to keep an additional USB-C cable in here with a power adapter. Then you do have the little tripod with your standard 3/8 male threads there, a USB-C cable for data transfer, and of course the Seestar S30 Pro itself. So it's all contained here in a nice little package. All right, everyone. Well, that wraps up my review of the Seestar S30 Pro Smart Telescope. It's definitely a worthy upgrade to the S30. You get that awesome main imaging sensor upgrade, the quadruplet lens system that makes the corner stars nice and sharp, as well as the upgrades to the wide field imaging system that includes autofocusing capabilities. So just awesome upgrades on the S30 Pro. There's really no disadvantages to it. So I think it's certainly worth the price above the S30. I honestly think just the main imaging sensor upgrade makes it worth it, but everything else really just makes it a pretty good value. So anyway, I appreciate you watching. Have a great day and clear skies.